Hey, what's up, gamers? Hola, konnichiwa, привет, bienvenue. What it do? So, listen, today we're actually going to be going into the Xbox Series X. It's been out for 6 months now, pretty much, give or take a few days. Actually, the day that I got it was on launch, which would be in a couple of weeks. But I wanted to go ahead and get this review out right now. So, let's jump into it. All right, so welcome back. Now, before we jump into the console itself, and no, we're not actually going to go through all the specs and things like that. You guys understand the 12 teraflops as far as the CPU goes, and then the 1 terabyte actual hard drive that's there. The fact that it's SSD, and there is an expandable SSD slot available. That card itself will run you about a good 250 bucks or so, because there's only one right now that's on the market that you can actually get for it. Still runs external hard drives and things, but beyond that, the first thing I want to get into is number one, this is not sponsored by Microsoft, anyone else. It's just a review since the console's been out for the past 6 months, give or take a few days, considering technically it'd be about 2 weeks from now that it's actually been a full 6 months. And I've actually had it since day one, and just wanted to go into a review of the games and all those different types of things that you can enjoy on this. Let's check something else out. First off, this is the controller that actually comes with the Series X. Now, if you notice right there in the center, you actually see that there's a little button right here. That center button is strictly for uploads. Essentially, it allows you to bypass pressing the home button and then having to press X in order to record a clip. Just hit that there, done. Much quicker. The other part of it is, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but the grips that are on the triggers itself. There's a little bit of roughed up edge there, and it literally just gives a little bit more traction on the triggers. As far as the feel of it in the hand, for me, it's one of those things where it's still kind of a lightweight situation, but it's much better than, I think, the old controllers. Now, excuse me, at the same time, I also have this, and this is my primary controller. It is the Elite Series 2. I mean, the rugged grips on it. You've got the back pedals, different things like that you can actually use in order to set up for your triggers or whatever buttons you want. And then you also have these sliding little buttons here, and all that's for is to actually set the sensitivity of the triggers. The triggers, of course, have the little rough, jagged edge there, just the same as that controller. So I mean, they kind of took the new controller and based it off of the Elite Series controllers. Now, before going any further, I do want to say this. I am not by any means a Sony hater. I'm the hugest PlayStation fan, Sony fan that there is, and I have been forever. This generation, it's one of those things where I didn't really want to get the PlayStation 5. And I'm going to, but the only reason I'm going to is to get the digital version, and it's for one title alone, and that's Final Fantasy. Huge Final Fantasy fan. The genre, the series itself, the RPG genre, just enjoyable. But it's upsetting that Microsoft didn't get the licensing for it. Of course, they will at some point, but that could be, 2, 5, 7 years down the road. And I'm looking to play that as soon as it actually comes out. But beyond that, let's go ahead and jump into the actual layout of the console, everything else from this point. Now, you take a look, your home screen, and yeah, I know, you guys probably see my email up there. Either it's going to get blurred out or I'm going to just leave it alone, because the fact is that email technically leads nowhere now. It's just, not even going to get into that, whatever. But Your layout is pretty much the same as what it was on the actual the Xbox One and the Xbox One S. Let's get myself out of here. Now, they have updated it a couple of different times since the actual consoles come out. But I mean, it's pretty much the same thing, the same standard, so on and so forth. One of the big things that this console, and I think a lot of people rely on heavily for this console, is the Xbox Game Pass because of all of the great stuff that they continuously release on Game Pass. Going into your menus, everything's pretty much laid out exactly the same. One of the differences between this console and its predecessor, the Xbox One, 360, everything else, if you notice the actual background movement on there, the dynamic backgrounds, it wasn't something that was available on there. And since I no longer have my Xbox One, I'm not sure if it's still available, even though we have two other Xboxes here in the house. But I've never actually checked the dynamic backgrounds on their systems. Now, alongside that, I mean, your profile setup and everything else is pretty much exactly the same. I mean, it has a few new scenes for background, stuff like that, but otherwise, it's all there. Getting into the real beef of it, your layout for your games, all here. You still see library management, all that good stuff is still exactly the same. No real changes in that whatsoever. As far as the actual gameplay itself, one of the huge things with this and what was so different about this launch over previous launches is the fact that, well, technically there were no actual titles that were brought out for this console. All of the titles have been backward compatible for both the Xbox One, the Series, and the Series X and S. Thing about it is that one of the great features about this console, even though yes, you can still play those games on, the Xbox One, the catch to it is the graphic enhancement, so on and so forth. That's what makes it so much better. The actual flow of some games actually feel faster. Your loading time is definitely faster. And the actual sound on the system itself is extremely quiet. And there's one exception to that. One exception. And that exception is Call of Duty Black Ops. At some point in time while you're playing on this console, you actually start hearing the fan. And I mean hearing the fan. But getting back into the main point here, the games themselves. There weren't any games that actually came out for the Series X or the Series S as a standalone sort of thing. I mean, all the games that came out were pretty much for both Xbox One and the Xbox Series X or S. Alongside that, a lot of the games that actually had come out prior, such as Watch Dogs and a few other titles, even though they were created prior to the launch, the release of the actual Series X and S, what ended up happening is you were given the ability to update those games for the new consoles right when you got them. And the really cool thing about it is that that direct delivery system works for numerous games. Some games that I didn't even expect it to work on. One of the first games I played on the Series X was actually Call of Duty Warzone, Call of Duty Modern Warfare. And the crazy thing about it was completely updated at that point in time. I did not expect it, but you could see it as soon as the game started, and it was kind of a shocker. I was like, well, this is different. I mean, the actual guns themselves looked so much more realistic. There was so much more texture to it, so much more shine, so much, everything, the actual map. And then in the gameplay itself, it seemed to move a whole lot faster and a whole lot smoother than it had prior. One of the next titles that actually came up at that point in time, a couple of days after the console launch itself, was actually Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. And that right there, it's something I think everybody was waiting for. I mean, we got a new Call of Duty, and of course it comes out at the same time as the console, everything else. And it was definitely amazing, absolutely amazing. A lot of the features have been updated now for it. Again, it's not, just a Series X or Series S game. It can be played by anyone, but one of the biggest things is that the actual visuals of it, the actual gameplay, the flow of the game, everything else seems a lot better on the Series X. One of the great things I like about this game now is what they've done with zombies. That's just, you made another standalone sort of zombie game by implementing Outbreak on there. I think that was really smart on Activision's behalf. Now, one title that actually was made specifically for the console, took a little while to come out, wasn't there on launch, anything like that, but it was released immediately on the Xbox Game Pass, is The Medium. Now, The Medium is kind of slow burn horror style game, kind of reminiscent of Resident Evil, different games of that nature. So it was definitely a kind of a step away from what was available at that point in time during the release, even, slightly after the release. It took a little while for it to come out, but all in all, I'd have to say myself, it's been a really fun and interesting game. Different in its own right, considering you play a character who is a medium, who actually can walk amongst the dead, live within their world and the real world at the same time. So it kind of gives you this split in reality that you're playing in. You're playing in the standard world, and then you're going into the land of the dead in order to solve the puzzles and, accomplish your goals there in the game. Now, another thing I definitely checked was there any effect on Grand Theft Auto 5? We've all been playing this game for, over 7 years now since its launch. And it was one of those things where they had even said that it wasn't going to be enhanced or anything right away. But I did notice a slight difference in the actual visuals as well as the gameplay itself being a lot smoother, different things like that. They were very, very minor, but they were there. I mean, it's obvious the system has to actually do some form of enhancement nearly on anything you play on it, even if it's an older title. Now, of course, alongside that, we got a lot of other great titles over time. We got Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This game here is absolutely visually amazing, absolutely impressive, all of those great things. The story, of course, plays on a lot of the Norse mythology, different things like that, and it plays into it, kind of the way that you expect an Assassin's Creed game to play into it. Does it go off on the deep end a lot of times and get a little bit, outside of what it's all about? To some extent, I would say the the entirety of the game is kind of like that. But at the same time, the gameplay is really, really good. And again, the visuals are stunning. And considering, everyone's been on lockdown for over the past year, that game was kind of a lot of people's getaway. I know it was. I've seen so many different memes, so many different pictures and things like that, literally of the landscapes throughout Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Another game that we got along with it was Cyberpunk. It's so rough because a lot of people were looking forward to Cyberpunk. Visually, the game is fantastic. You made this huge open world, but so many things were flawed with it. So many bugs, so many crashes, so many illogical things that go outside the bounds of physics. And even though yes, it's a game, it's one of those things people still want to believe to some extent. When I'm driving a car and I jump out, I shouldn't be able to just stand right in place and I'm good. I should actually be more along the lines of the GTA situation where I'm out the car, I'm rolling, I'm bleeding, I'm hurt. That's what it's supposed to be about. But beyond that, personally, I still enjoyed playing the game. And it's one of those things, I was looking at it from the standpoint of the artistic style of it, the world that they put together, and of course, the actual, the story itself. Now, granted, I haven't finished it because it's one of those things. I've been playing so many different games at the same time, but I am going to go back to it and I am going to complete it just because, I enjoy gaming as a whole. So now, Hitman 3. This had to have been one of the more fun, more strategic, and I mean just all around visually amazing games to have been put out by that point for the actual Series X or Series S. Now, I have to kind of take that back because there's one more game that I'm going to get into in a second that I personally believe game of the year all the way. But Hitman 3, we know the Hitman franchise. This is the last one from the creators of Hitman. And to go out in this way, not a better way it could have been done. The story was there, the visuals were there, the gameplay was there, the banana was there, and everybody who's played it, you guys know what I'm talking about with the banana, the most lethal weapon in that game. But it brought you back to, of course, Hitman and Hitman 2, the newer versions of the actual games that we've been playing over the past few years. But it took it back to the feeling of the original Hitman, how it felt to play that game for the first time. There was nothing like it. So this actually did the job. It was amazing. And I'm telling you right now, if you haven't played it, you should. Now, the game that I personally believe not only should have been Game of the Year, but it more than likely should have been one of the most picked up games on the release date of the console. Yakuza Like a Dragon. I know people are gonna trip out. Yakuza Like a Dragon. Yes, trust me. This game kind of had it all. Number one, if you played the Yakuza series at all, if you played any of the games, they kind of trap you in there. Granted, the story of each one is kind of the same every time, and you can figure it out. But that's because you typically understand, the points of the game, the cultural indignations and things like that it actually puts out and puts forward. But visually, even though Yakuza Like a Dragon has that Yakuza, that Sega drawing feeling to it, the semi-cartoony feeling when it comes to the gameplay, and of course, all of the comedic, outlandishly comedic instances that it actually has in the game was brilliant. The story was amazing. It veered off from our normal hero, Kazuma Kiryu, and goes into a whole new hero that initially makes you kind of feel like, am I gonna like this? I mean, I was hoping, no, trust me. It needed a fresh face, and it got one. The main problem I had initially when I first started the game, I personally thought, there's no way I'm going to enjoy this battle system. No way. Sure enough, played the game, got into it, first few battles, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, this is a little bit better. And that went on to the point where I'm now collecting every single possible thing in the game, have the best weapons for every one of the characters I can use, and just fell in love with the whole scenario of the game in and of itself. It's absolutely brilliant. So for anybody that didn't pick it up because they saw that it wasn't Kazuma or Kiryu on the main cover, if you thought that this game's not going to be that great, even as an introduction, as the first place that you step into Yakuza versus playing 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, which have all been remastered now, that would be a perfect starting point. Now, beyond that, there's a ton of different games that we're all looking forward to. I mean, we've got a slew of games coming out. We've got a game called Chorus, which is a single player space shooter. The Fable reboot, now that should be interesting. We've got State of Decay 3, Avowed, Scorn, Stalker 2, which is a horror FPS. And the Scorn game, it reminds me a lot of Alien, the Alien franchise as a whole, especially Prometheus. I don't know why it is, and seeing the trailer for that game, that's exactly what it reminds me of. But Stalker, I mean, taking a look at this one here, this game's going to be something else right here. Wow. Now, Avowed is an RPG, and I mean, yeah, they're going to put out a few different RPGs from the Microsoft studios and probably other studios as well. But the big thing is, it's a letdown to not have Final Fantasy there. And of course, the main title that everybody's waiting for, which everyone hoped it would be a launch title. Of course it wasn't, and then the date got pushed back and pushed back again. And right now, a lot of people are still hoping that it's somewhere around June or something along the lines of that it comes out, but it may not be until later in the year. That is Halo Infinite. And I'm almost sure that we're all pretty positive that it's going to be the end of the year when Halo Infinite comes out. I mean, this game is something that everyone's been waiting for a long time, since the last, release of a Halo game. And we're kind of waiting for either what's next or in the series on a high note, on a really good title, period. But before this video drags out any longer, like I said, even though these consoles didn't actually come with a lot of launch titles, things like that, or launch titles specifically made for the console itself, it's one of those things, the titles that are there and the fact that you can upgrade a great deal of the titles in order to actually get better visuals and better gameplay, and the fact that there will be titles upcoming specifically for the Series X and the Series S. Hands down, no brainer. If you're a gamer and you're like me and you've owned every console that's been out, you're going to pick this up if you haven't already. And if it's one of those things where you're looking to upgrade your console, you've got the ability to do it at this point in time, go for it. Having an Xbox One or an Xbox One S, like I was saying, you can still play most of the titles that have come out and most of the titles that are going to come out, because they're going to support those systems for, I personally think for another good 2 to 3 years. That's usually the lifespan of, support for a previous system. Of course, they could support it for even longer. I think they did so to an extent with the Xbox 360. So yeah, it's definitely worth it to pick it up because of all of the new functions to it, all of the processing power. But as far as the games, you're still playing them on the Xbox One right now. Of course, there will be those that will strictly be for these two Series X and S's, and then the other part of it is 8K functionality. It's not available right now because of the fact that there's no games for it yet, but it will be available as soon as a company decides, you know what, we're going to go ahead and make a 4K/8K game. It's that simple. And it's kind of a no-brainer, even though not a great deal of people actually have 8K technology in their home. A lot more than likely will as the years go by. But hey, that's all for today. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And keep bringing content to you. Different types of stuff all the time. But hopefully you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the console, if you have one, or if you're planning on picking one up. Thanks a lot. I'm the Shell Bullet 8. I'm out.